Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing my top fiction reads for the year 2023 and things that I recommend you reading if you have any of these on your to-read list. So in 2023 I read 272 books. Normally I read about an equal split of fiction and nonfiction. However, in 2023 I read a lot more fiction than nonfiction. My split was 37% nonfiction and 63% fiction, so I did more heavily favor fiction this year. I had an excellent year. I read a lot of great fiction books, so I want to recommend the top ones that I read this year and that you may find interesting if you are looking for some book recommendations. Also, if you have your favorite fiction books from 2023, please share them down below. I love to hear what other people enjoyed reading for the last year, and I would love to get some book recommendations if they are fiction books that I have not read yet. So let's talk about my 2023 top reads, and I will have a sip of my tea to start us off. I want to drink this while it's hot. All right, so I read a lot of manga, as already mentioned, which kind of skewed my fiction versus nonfiction percentage, which is normally and over time a lot closer to a 50-50 split. So there's several manga series on my top fiction list. The top would have to be Haikyu. I actually did not start reading the Haikyu series by Haruichi Furudate in 2023. However, I did read volumes 6 through 40, so a large portion as there's only 45 volumes in the series, and I have the last 5 volumes out right now, so I will be finishing the series shortly. I was sleeping on this series. It was actually recommended to me by a guy that I wound up breaking up with, and I feel like that kind of put me off the series, although I should have just read it because the series recommendation was excellent and I shouldn't have let that interfere with my personal recommendation. I loved this series. I'm sure I'm going to love the last 5 volumes. I read so much of it. It's very emotionally tense to read. I feel like I get very stressed when I read the volumes because I want the team that we're following, Karasuno High School boys volleyball team, to win the tournaments, to win the games they're in. So I feel like I get very emotionally invested, and I had a great time reading this series this year. However, because I'm about to finish the series up, I'm going to feel like there's a void in my reading life, and I'm going to have to find something to fill that. Another series that I was reading this year that I absolutely loved, and this was a suggestion, I believe, by a YouTube comment. I believe that's where I got the suggestion from, although I also received this suggestion from a friend and from my sister. So the suggestion came from multiple places, and that is Kaguya-Sama, Love is War by Akasaka. I have both read a good portion of the manga as well as watching the anime, which I don't watch as much TV shows anime as I do read. So it is kind of rare that I will do that crossover, but I loved this series. I loved the anime, and I think it was just really sweet and fun. I don't think I've laughed as much reading this series as any other manga series that I've read, and I have read other funny manga series. I just feel like I was, it sounds cliche, but rolling around laughing while reading this series because it was so funny, but I was also invested in the romance because the author kind of built up, the author did a really good job of balancing the romance and the humor in this series, so I highly recommend if you haven't read the series, but I think I was just late to the party because a lot of other people I know have read and have enjoyed this series, or they have at least seen the anime. And if you have seen the anime, don't forget to check out the manga if you enjoy reading as well. Next is not a manga, but a comic series. I read Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. This was a suggestion from my sister and my aunt, who are both huge readers. They were suggesting this series to me for a while, and I was also sleeping on this series. Hockey has grown on me this year, but hockey is not really like a sport I closely follow, and my aunt also neglected to tell me that this comic series was a romance, which I think she did intentionally because I feel like I don't gravitate towards romance necessarily. So she did not tell that to me. She just said, read Check Please. And when I get this book out from the library, I finally got it out of the library to get my aunt off my back because she kept recommending it to me. And I thought it was, my interpretation, didn't read anything on the back of the cover. I thought it was like a hockey team trying to win a championship. I thought it was more like the sports comic. I thought it was going to be more in the vein of Haikyu, where it's more about the team trying to win than, I didn't realize there was a romance aspect to this book. And this was the kind of series that, it's only 2 books. I read it and then I immediately reread it, and then I read it again, and then I read it again, and it put me into a book hangover where I didn't want to start any other book because that series was so good. Additionally, I went out and purchased this book, which I do not purchase a lot of books just because where I'm am in life, I move apartments quite a bit because I don't own a house yet, so I hate moving books around. When I get my own place, I will have a larger personal library, but for now, I just utilize my local public library and only get a couple books. I only purchase books that I really enjoy and I know I'm going to reuse and return to time and time again, and this was one of those. I got hardcover copies of both Check Please 1 and 2. So if that is on your to-read list, definitely don't do what I did and sleep on it. The story is really sweet. I loved the characters and I just thought it was a great comic. And I can't believe it took me so long to read that comic. I think that's actually the title of my book review of volume 1 was I Can't Believe I Waited So Long to Read This, I think was the title of it. A wonderful book. I'm glad that I read it this year. Next, we're going to go into some non-comic or non-manga recommendations. The first is Terminal Uprising by Jim C. Hines. I actually had never read anything by Jim Hines before, and I checked this book out because I was intrigued by the idea of janitors and the apocalypse and how they were going to save the world, and there was a cute little worm-looking alien on the cover. There was not a lot of thought. Sometimes there's not a lot of thought that goes into me taking a book out of the library other than, this looks fun, and I put it in my bag and take it home, and this one wound up being a hit. I loved it. I feel like I have another author who I enjoy. I kind of enjoy the blend of fantasy and humor if the humor lands with me, and I think Hines's humor lands with me. I found it very enjoyable, but also the plot was very compelling too. It wasn't like we just got caught up in the humor. There was actually some interesting plot and mystery going on in the world around. So I actually have the last book of that series out, and I'm starting Goblin Quest. I don't know if that's the name of the series, but I'm going to be starting another Jim C. Hines book in 2024 because I loved this series so much, and I'm glad that I found another author that I enjoyed. Next was an audiobook that I listened to, and again, I laughed a lot, but there was also some serious topics that were explored in the book, and that was The Midnight Plan of the Repo Man by Bruce Cameron. I found the storytelling very enjoyable. The audiobook narrator did a really good job. I actually just got it because I thought it was going to be like a fun mystery, and the name sounded kind of catchy, The Midnight Plan of the Repo Man, and I listened to it while taking a day-long road trip around the area that I live, just visiting all these different sites I wanted to check out, and I had a blast, and I've been recommending and trying to get people in my life to read it, but I can't sell them on it. I don't know, because I felt like the title was very catchy and it was something I wanted to read, but I need to sell more people on reading this book because I thought it was very funny and I really enjoyed the book. But I feel like the author used that book and the humorous moments to also touch on more serious things, like how to remake yourself after making a very serious mistake early in life, how you can kind of come back and build a life after that, when maybe the direction you thought your life was going to take is no longer an option that you can go. I will let you listen to the audiobook or read the book and see what you think about it, but I really enjoyed that one, and I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. Next is another author who I fell in love with this year, and I'm going to specifically mention her novel, The Long Tomorrow. That is Leigh Brackett. She was called the Queen of Space Opera, and I have never heard of this woman before this year, but I have been reading her novellas and her novel, The Long Tomorrow, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was really well done. I like her writing style. She was writing in 40s, 50s, so, and she has since passed away, so she's not a current active author, but I really enjoy her work and I recommend checking it out. I would recommend starting with The Long Tomorrow. At least, I have only read 4 or 5 pieces of her work, but to me, that's the best novel. She does have a lot of shorter novellas, though, if you want to check them out. I just feel after reading The Long Tomorrow, it won a Hugo, I believe, or it was a finalist for a Hugo, so it's definitely considered high quality writing, and whenever I read things on Leigh Brackett, they mention The Long Tomorrow, so I would definitely recommend that book as well because I enjoyed that one and I think you may as well. I have reviews and I also have a whole playlist devoted to Leigh Brackett and everything that I've read by her, so if that sounds interesting or you want to learn more, you can check out that playlist on my channel. Finally, we have another one that was a recommendation from a YouTube viewer. I love getting recommendations from people who watch my videos because they usually turn me towards books that I might not be familiar with or might not know about, and I've got some great recommendations. I actually have a whole playlist where I put every book that someone recommends and I read on that playlist. I just think it's great. And this is The Man in the Maze by Robert Silverberg. Robert Silverberg was a sci-fi author, and this was a sci-fi book. I just felt like the whole concept was interesting. There is a maze that is a very deadly maze, and it seems to have some sort of meaning. It's found on a planet, and people are trying to figure out how to get through the maze and maybe what the maze is there for. I thought it was a really cool and interesting concept. I had never heard of this book before someone recommended it. I really haven't heard a lot about it since reading it, but I would recommend checking it out if you like sci-fi and this is one that you haven't encountered or read. So thank you to the individual who suggested that book because I did enjoy it and it did make my top fiction books of the year. Of course, I read a lot of books this year, 272, of which 63% were fiction. So there were a lot of great books that didn't make this cut that were still excellent books that I highly recommend. So go check out my channel. I have a lot of book reviews if you are interested in getting more suggestions from me. I do read quite a bit and I love discussing books. I also love getting recommendations and I would love to hear your top fiction reads of 2023. So put those down below if you would like to suggest them to me. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and I hope your 2024 is a really good year.